It was just past 9 a.m. when David Jenkins stepped into the marble-floored lobby of the Metro One Corporate Center. He was carrying a slim cardboard box under one arm, labeled Private Legal Docs. No suit, no tie. Just a navy windbreaker, khaki pants, and old sneakers that creaked with each step. The security guard at the front desk, a stocky man in his 40s with a crisp uniform and a practiced frown, looked up as David entered. "Deliveries go through the service entrance," he said without a greeting. David paused, glanced at the man's name tag, Morris, and nodded once. "I'm not here to deliver. I have a meeting," he said quietly, stepping forward. Morris stood from his stool, hand up like a traffic cop. "I said the service entrance. Meetings don't come with boxes like that." Behind David, a young woman in a pencil skirt and heels walked past without interruption. No questions. No challenge. David adjusted the box in his arms. "I've got confidential documents for an office on the 32nd floor. You're not getting upstairs without clearance," Morris snapped. "What company are you with?" There was no aggression in David's voice when he answered. "I'm not with a company." "Then you're not going anywhere." Morris folded his arms. "Now take it around back, or I call building management." David didn't move. He could have explained, but he didn't. Not yet. David didn't argue. He just stepped to the side, set the box down gently near one of the marble planters, and sat on the edge of the stone bench that lined the lobby wall. From there, he could see the elevators. People came and went. None of them noticed him. Morris kept glancing over like he was waiting for David to make a wrong move. 15 minutes passed, then 20. A junior associate from a law firm upstairs arrived, swiped her badge, and smiled at Morris, who returned the smile easily. She didn't see David. Most didn't. Another delivery guy came through the service entrance. Backpack, clipboard, headphones in. No problem. David remained seated, checking his watch once, then again. The tension never left Morris's face. Eventually, Morris picked up the desk phone, dialing with sharp jabs of his finger. He turned away to speak quietly, eyes flicking back toward David mid-conversation. David heard only fragments. "Sitting here 20 minutes, claims he's got a meeting. Won't say who, just sitting there." Morris hung up, exhaled hard, then walked back over. "I just called management," he said. "If you're legit, they'll send someone down." David nodded once. "Good," he said. Nothing more. Morris squinted at him like he couldn't decide if he was being mocked or ignored. David just folded his hands in his lap and waited. He'd been through this before. Too many times. And still, the feeling in his chest hadn't dulled. The quiet shame they expected him to feel. The doubt they were so quick to assign. But this time would be different. The elevator chimed. From it stepped a woman in a fitted blazer, heels clicking across the marble. Tablet in hand, sharp eyes scanning the lobby. Her name was Lena, head of property management. She didn't notice David at first. She went straight to Morris. "You called about someone refusing to leave?" Morris gestured toward David, who was now standing beside his box. "He says he has a meeting upstairs but won't give a name. Been sitting here almost half an hour." Lena turned to David, her tone clipped. "Sir, if you're making a delivery, it needs to go through the proper channels." David looked at her, calm as ever. "I'm not delivering anything." "Then what are you doing here?" I told him. "I have a meeting on 32. "With who?" David tilted his head slightly, voice still low. "You." Lena blinked, thrown. "What?" "I'm David Jenkins." The name didn't click. He reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out a black leather case. Flipped it open. Inside, a slim ID card with the Metro One logo and a nameplate in brushed silver. David Jenkins, owner, Matroon Properties. Lena stared. Morris took a half step back, eyes wide. His posture shifted in an instant, from authoritative to uncertain. David held her gaze, then looked toward the elevators. "I believe we had 9:30 blocked for a walkthrough?" Lena nodded slowly, the color draining from her face. "Yes, of course. We weren't expecting." David cut in gently. "I know." He bent, picked up the box. "Shall we?" Lena led the way to the elevators, her pace a touch too fast, words fumbling as she tried to recover. I apologize, Mr. Jenkins. I wasn't informed you'd be arriving this morning. If we'd known." David stepped in beside her as the elevator doors slid open. "You'd have rolled out the red carpet?" he asked, voice even. Lena didn't answer. Morris was still frozen behind the front desk. The other guards were now whispering, staring, their confidence shriveled under the fluorescent lights. Inside the elevator, Lena pressed the button for 32. The doors closed. The hum of the rising car filled the silence. David turned slightly toward her. "You're new, right?" "6 months," she said, keeping her eyes on the floor count. He nodded. "Long enough to know how guests get treated in that lobby." Lena hesitated. "It's protocol. For security." David's tone stayed level. "Security isn't the issue. Assumption is." That landed hard. She didn't argue. The elevator slowed. Dinged. 32nd floor. The doors opened to a wide hallway lined with glass offices and sleek conference rooms. A receptionist looked up and immediately stood when she saw David. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins." David gave a polite nod, then turned back to Lena. "I'll walk myself from here." She nodded, trying to smile, but her face was tight with regret. David paused before stepping away. "Lena," he said softly. She looked at him. "Don't worry about Morris. I'll handle that." Back in the lobby, Morris was pacing now. He kept glancing toward the elevators like he expected someone to come down and fix what just happened. The other guard, younger, stayed seated but avoided eye contact, pretending to read something on his screen. The silence felt heavier now. Nobody laughed. 10 minutes passed before the service elevator opened and Lena stepped out alone. She walked straight up to the desk. Morris straightened, trying to look composed. "So, who was that guy?" Lena's voice was flat. "The owner of this entire building." Morris blinked. "Yes," she cut in. "He owns the property. Every floor. Every tenant pays rent to his company." Morris didn't speak. His mouth opened, then closed again. "I need your incident log for today," Lena added, tapping her tablet. "Everything from 9 o'clock to now." "You're writing me up?" he asked, voice rising slightly. "I'm documenting," she said simply. "Mr. Jenkins asked me to." Across the lobby, 2 tenants entered, chatting casually, then stopped mid-sentence as they passed Morris. Their smiles faded. The mood had shifted. Morris lowered his voice. "I didn't know who he was." Lena didn't blink. "That's exactly the problem." Upstairs, David walked into a corner conference room, the box still tucked under his arm. A few executives were already seated, chatting over coffee and laptops. When they saw him, the conversation stopped. "Morning, Mr. Jenkins," one of them said, standing quickly. David nodded and set the box on the table. "Thanks for making time." He didn't mention the lobby. Not yet. Instead, he opened the box and pulled out 3 neatly labeled folders. Leasing updates, renovation budgets, and quarterly tenant reports. "We'll keep this brief," he said, sliding the folders across the table. "But there's something I need to add before we begin." The room quieted. David's tone remained calm, even as he spoke with a quiet firmness that made everyone sit straighter. "This morning I walked through the front doors carrying a package, wearing clothes that didn't fit the mold. I was told to leave, denied access, not because I posed a threat, not because of protocol, but because someone looked at me and saw a problem." A murmur of discomfort. Eyes darted between one another. David didn't raise his voice. "It's not the first time it's happened. Won't be the last. But it's the first time it's happened in a building I own." One of the men across the table adjusted his tie. "We had no idea." "I know," David said. "That's why I'm saying it." He let the silence stretch, eyes steady. "Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to every guest, every tenant, every future investor." That kind of gatekeeping doesn't just reflect on one guard. It reflects on culture. He folded his hands. "And culture is something I plan to change." Downstairs, the mood had turned quiet. Morris no longer stood with the same posture. He sat stiffly at the desk, typing into a form he barely looked at. The younger guard beside him didn't speak, but his occasional glances toward Morris were different now. Not deferential, not afraid, just assessing. In the lobby corners, where building staff once gathered for quick jokes and coffee breaks, silence hovered. Tenants came and went, and a few paused long enough to notice something had shifted. Lena remained near the front, tablet in hand, but more observant now, watching everything with a sharper eye. Not because David told her to. He hadn't needed to. The call he'd made from upstairs had been brief, professional, direct. "I'd like a training review scheduled by end of week," he had said. "Lobby staff first." Lena had agreed immediately. Now, she watched Morris type, his face tight with a frustration he didn't dare show. It wasn't humiliation she saw. It was reckoning. A man being forced to see himself through someone else's eyes, for maybe the first time in years. The meeting upstairs wrapped early. David stood as the executives gathered their folders, murmuring polite goodbyes. No one brought up the lobby again. They didn't need to. His message had landed. Outside the conference room, Lena waited near the elevators, arms crossed loosely, eyes on the floor. When David stepped out, she looked up quickly. "I've got the incident logged," she said. "We'll begin reviewing all lobby procedures today. And I've already spoken to the third-party security firm." David nodded once, then looked past her toward the windows lining the hallway. "You don't need to overcorrect," he said. "You just need to pay attention." She didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, "It shouldn't have taken this." David gave a small shrug. "It usually does." They rode the elevator down in silence. When the doors opened, the lobby felt different. Not in look, but in atmosphere. Less assured, less smug. Morris stood when he saw them, as if unsure what to do. David walked past without breaking stride. Lena followed, but she paused near the desk. She looked Morris in the eye. "Start treating everyone who walks in here like they own the place," she said. "Because one day they just might." Later that afternoon, whispers started moving through the building. It began with a receptionist on the 19th floor telling a coworker, "Did you hear the guy in the hoodie this morning was Mr. Jenkins?" Her voice carried just enough to be overheard by two paralegals walking by. They repeated it at lunch. By 3 p.m., a junior analyst in the accounting firm on 25 was retelling the story in the break room, eyes wide. "He just walked in like he was nobody," he said. "Security tried to send him out the back. People didn't laugh. They listened." A janitor who had nodded at David that morning while pushing a mop bucket smiled to himself when he heard. "Knew something was different about that one," he muttered. Even among tenants, the mood shifted. A few recalled their own awkward lobby experiences. Nothing overt, just slow service, dismissive tone. The unspoken scale everyone's weighed on the moment they walk in. One assistant manager from a tech startup said it plain. "If the building's owner can get profiled like that, what chance do we have?" Nobody answered, but the silence said plenty. By evening, the guard rotation had changed. Morris was gone. Sent home early by Lena with a stack of policy manuals and an invitation to reconsider his tone. The younger guard, Jerome, stayed behind, manning the desk with a little more awareness than he had that morning. Around 5:45, David came back through the lobby. This time, no one stopped him. He approached the desk, not to criticize, just to check something. Jerome straightened, clearly nervous. "Mr. Jenkins," he said quickly. "I didn't know. This morning, if I had, I would have." David raised a hand, stopping him gently. "It's not about knowing who I am." Jerome nodded slowly, eyes lowered. "It's about not assuming who I'm not," David said. He let the words sit for a second. Then, quietly, "You don't need a title to deserve respect." Jerome swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." David offered a short nod and turned to leave. But halfway to the doors, he stopped, looked back. "You ever been treated that way?" he asked. Jerome hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, "Yeah, too many times." David didn't smile. He just nodded once. "Then you know better," he said, and walked out. That night, Jerome sat alone at the lobby desk, scrolling through the updated protocol Lena had emailed. But he wasn't really reading. His mind kept drifting back to David's words. "You don't need a title to deserve respect." They echoed louder than anything else he'd heard that day. Jerome had taken this job 2 years ago, fresh out of security training, thinking it was just a stepping stone, something temporary. He'd been told to follow orders, maintain appearances, and watch for anything out of place. He had learned quickly what out of place usually meant. Today was the first time someone had said it out loud, and meant it. He remembered the first time he'd been told to stop someone who looked out of place, a middle-aged black woman in a blazer, carrying files. She'd smiled and answered politely, but he'd seen the flash of something in her eyes, recognition, exhaustion. Now he understood it better. Across the room, the polished floors of the lobby reflected the light just like always. But to Jerome, it didn't feel the same. It felt like someone had finally turned the mirror back around. The next morning, Lena opened her inbox to find a short message from David. Subject, Lobby culture from David Jenkins to Lena Carr. Lena, appreciate you moving quickly yesterday. I know it wasn't easy. Let's not waste the moment. Schedule a walkthrough with all lobby staff next week. I'll join. No need for formalities. I just want to talk. David. She read it twice. There was no reprimand, no blame, just clarity and expectation. She forwarded the note to HR with a single line. We'll need new training materials by Friday. Make them human. Then she sat back, thinking about everything that had unfolded in just 24 hours. David hadn't threatened anyone, hadn't raised his voice, but his presence had forced an entire building to stop and see itself. And not everyone liked what they saw. But change didn't ask for comfort. It asked for honesty, and someone willing to start the conversation others were too polite or too afraid to begin. At the cafe on the corner, 2 tenants from the 12th floor were deep in conversation. I still can't believe that was the owner, one said, stirring her coffee. I've walked past that guy a dozen times. Never even noticed him. Her coworker nodded, eyes still fixed on the window overlooking the Metro 1 lobby. Yeah, makes you think, huh? About what? He didn't answer right away. Then, about how fast we judge people. How fast we decide who belongs. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the steady stream of people passing through the glass doors across the street. Some in suits, some in sneakers. Most unnoticed. The first woman sighed. I mean, Morris was a jerk about it, but we've all kind of done it, haven't we? The other looked down. I have. Neither of them finished their coffee. The cup sat between them, cooling. Across the city, David sat in a quiet office, reviewing a maintenance report. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, but he paused for a moment. The lobby incident already felt like something people were starting to turn into a story. A story about a man who came in dressed like nobody, and left as the one they all answered to. But that wasn't the story that mattered to him. Not really. What mattered was whether they remembered the feeling, the awkward stillness, the questions they couldn't shake, and whether that feeling would still be there a week later. Friday morning, before the building filled with its usual rhythm of heels on tile and elevator chimes, Jerome stood in front of the mirror in the basement-level staff locker room. He adjusted his uniform collar, straightened his name badge, practiced his greeting out loud. Good morning, welcome to Metro 1. Pause, softer this time, less robotic. Good morning, let me help you with that. He stopped and looked at his reflection, noticing the difference in his own voice, how it sounded when he meant it, when it wasn't about checking a box or following a script, but about seeing someone. Behind him, 2 other guards came in, talking casually. When they saw Jerome rehearsing, they quieted, watched for a second. Then one of them asked, "You expecting the big boss again?" Jerome shook his head. "Not sure. Doesn't matter." He picked up his clipboard and headed for the lobby. As he passed them, he added, "But I'm gonna act like I am." They didn't laugh. Not this time. The following week, the building staff gathered in the main conference room. Not in uniform, not on shift, just people in folding chairs, facing David Jenkins at the front of the room. He didn't stand behind the podium. He didn't read from notes. He stood beside them, holding nothing but his hands in his pockets and the quiet weight of the previous days behind him. "I'm not here to talk about what happened," he began. "You all saw it, or heard about it." A few heads lowered. "But I do want to talk about what happens next." He paused. Let the stillness settle. Respect shouldn't depend on what someone wears, or whether they walk in with a badge or a box, or if their skin makes you do a double take. No one moved. I walked into my own building and got treated like a risk. And if that can happen to me, I promise, it's already happened to people who had no title to fall back on. No company logo behind their name. He looked around the room. Calm. Steady. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to look harder. To unlearn some things you didn't even know you were taught. And to remember that the person standing in front of you could be someone's boss. Someone's mother. Someone who matters. He let out a quiet breath. And if you still need a reason to treat people with respect, he added, let it be this. You never know who's watching. The room stayed silent. Not out of fear. Out of understanding. David stepped back. All right, he said. Let's get back to work. As people stood, chairs scraping softly, no one spoke right away. But Jerome held the door open for each one of them, meeting every eye with a quiet nod. Lena lingered last, glancing back at the now empty room. She looked at David. You think it'll stick? He looked toward the lobby, where a new visitor was just stepping through the front doors. No briefcase, no suit, just curiosity on their face. David smiled, just barely. It better.